Okay, so I think the next recording has started. So my name's Julia Cook. I'm from the Open University, and it's my pleasure to be chairing this next part of the session. A huge welcome to everybody. It's so brilliant to have so many people along. We have 3 speakers next, each speaking for 10 minutes, and then we'll have questions to the panel at the end of that. So please put your questions in as you think of them, and we'll collate them and ask them of the speaker on your behalf, just to streamline the process so we don't have too many mics going on and off. So just to start, it's my great pleasure to introduce James Berghan from the University of Otago in New Zealand, who's going to kick us off with the wild goose chase. Thanks, James.
Hi, James. Just before you start, can you take control? Brilliant. Thanks very much.
Cool. Thanks, Julia. Kia ora koutou. Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name's James, and I'm really excited to be able to join you tonight from Aotearoa, New Zealand. This is my first EFL showcase, so I'm really excited to hear more about the different talks that will be going on over the next couple of days. I've lost my presentation for a moment.
I'll just upload the slides again for you. 1 second.
Just while that's happening, I'll give you a 1 minute warning when your time's nearly up.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, can you see the slides okay, James? Yeah, brilliant.
Yep.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, so a little bit about me. At the beginning of last year, I started my my current role as an academic, so as a lecturer in urban design at the University of Otago. So it's New Zealand's oldest university, and a shameless plug here, I'll say New Zealand's best university, but I am perhaps a little bit biased there. But our academic year falls within 2 main semesters within the calendar year. So first semester's between February and June, and then we have a second semester between July and October. So shortly after I started, my first teaching semester began, and I teach my main courses are urban design courses within a wider program of surveying and land development. So I was teaching this course, Urban Design 1, within that first semester. So the class was about 60 students within the cohort, mostly in their third year of studying. And as I mentioned, most of our students are within a professional program, so leading to careers in surveying, in urban planning and project management particularly. And this isn't an urban design degree, so I'm really conscious that I'm just teaching an introduction to urban design within the context of those broader programs. And my philosophy for teaching the paper is that I want students to develop their urban design lens. So I want them to be able to recognize urban design in the world around them and perhaps ask, why is that thing being designed like that? How does it impact different people, and what could I do to improve that? So back to the timeline. Within our first week of semester last year, we've had our first COVID case reported in New Zealand, and over the next month, we introduced alert level system with different levels of restriction. But by week 5 of semester, we moved into a very restrictive lockdown, and we stayed there for about 7 weeks. So most of the teaching semester ended up being online. So working from home, all the teaching done online, and very limited things open. So the shift in online teaching meant we lost the ability to run the fieldwork components. For me, the main challenge was the loss of things like neighbourhood tours and site visits. So I thought about some alternatives like virtual tours, but I was quite keen to move away from the screen, and ultimately settled on a scavenger hunt using an app called Goosechase. So in our restrictive lockdown, we were allowed to go to the supermarket, or we were allowed to go for a walk around the neighbourhood to get fresh air and a little bit of exercise. So I thought this scavenger hunt could utilise on that ability to walk around our neighbourhoods. So I framed it as a self-directed urban design tour. The scavenger hunt was made up of 45 tasks or missions, and each mission was worth between 100 and 1,000 points. 1,000 points equated to 1% of the students' marks. So students could collect 10,000 points to get the maximum 10% mark from this assignment. Students were able to complete the scavenger hunt wherever they were spending lockdown. So some stayed in Dunedin where I am, but others travelled around the country back to their hometowns. So the tasks were designed so students could participate wherever they were. And the scavenger hunt was open for 4 weeks. So they could chip away at it over the 4-week period, or some of them could spend kind of an intensive day and do it all at once. As I mentioned, it was designed to complement our neighbourhood walks and to really try and embed that philosophy of allowing students to develop their urban design lens. So yeah, I was really keen to see students be able to take lecture content and see it in the world around them. So these are some of the examples of missions that derived from our module on transport. So the top image, we've got a student who's captured an image of a raised pedestrian crossing, and then another one where students identified a problem in an intersection near where they live. And the missions comprised of 3 different types. There were text-based missions, photo-based missions like these ones, or video-based submissions, or a combination of both. So the one on the bottom here, Fix My Street, was a combination of photo and text. They take a photo and provide some of the answer within a text caption as well. The students would self-determine their grades for this assignment. So this was a reactive response. I had to rearrange different assessment and replaced it with this scavenger hunt project, but I basically set it as 10,000 points equals 10%. I provided a pool of those 45 tasks, which were about 18,000 points altogether. So there was some redundancy. Students didn't have to complete every mission. They could pick and choose which ones suited them and their circumstances at the time. And there was the ability to add in some light touch marking. So I could mark student submissions in real time. If they didn't quite meet the objective of the submission, I was able to adjust the points. So either reduce the point value they were awarded or remove it entirely. And students were then able to see that, see the feedback and resubmit a mission for that. And a surprising result of this was that all but 7 students of the class received the full 10%. All but 1 received greater than 9%. And a lot of students went over the 10,000 point goal as well. For the video and photo submissions, students could see their classmate submissions. So it kind of popped up like a Facebook feed. And that was a conscious decision that I was really keen to encourage students to share their findings with each other and see what some of their classmates were doing as a way to build that social element. More of the text ones were kept private, both for balancing a bit of privacy, and some of them had the ability to copy and paste. So I did take off the ability to see each other's text responses. And while most of the missions were course related, there were some just to encourage a bit of fun. One thing I learned after the piece was I didn't quite think through the Abbey Road challenge. So trying to recreate the Beatles' famous Abbey Road album cover. Many of our students were in small households. And so I think 2 people was the maximum that we got through in any photo of people on the pedestrian crossing. And living art, the challenge at the bottom there, again, I initially put that in just as something fun, but it actually turned out to be a really great discussion point for our lectures on art in the city and ideas like placemaking.
1 minute to go.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah, while the lockdown reduced during the teaching semester, took away the ability to conduct our in-person fieldwork, it led to an alternative which unintentionally because it was a very reactive process, might have ended up being more equitable than the original. So students were able to work at their own pace. There was redundancy to pick and choose missions based on interest or ability, submitting answers using different types of media, and to participate wherever they were living, with even rural students. And a lot of the material fed back into lectures, so we're able to draw on their own local examples to build class discussions on. And students could determine their own grade, so there was no minimum or maximum value. It really was up to students what they wanted to put in. And I was blown away by the level of participation. I didn't expect the students to get so involved, and so it was really a massive highlight for me during a particularly challenging teaching semester. And at least anecdotally from some of the students, it was a highlight for a lot of them as well. Cool, thank you.
Thank you very much, James. That was really enjoyable to listen to, and I think I'd like to take your class now. I can see some questions have come in that you might like to read and start thinking about. I will ask them to you at the end. And now we will cross to Mirjam Glessmer from the University of Berghan in Norway, talking about combining digital methods and real experiences in field trips. So I think your slides will appear in a minute. James, you got lots of applause. There were lots of clapping appeared on my screen. Great. So thank you very much, Mirjam.
Hello. I'm trying to take control of my slides right now. Yes. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. And you are seeing the, the notes. I don't know how to get rid of the notes now. Can anyone help me, please?
We can't see the notes, Mirjam. It's only you who can see them.
Okay, so I got rid of them now for me. So yeah, I don't need them. Anyway, thank you very much for having me. I'm very happy to be here. I'm presenting on behalf of Janina Dresden and Katja Kuwald. Janina was a bachelor student that I co-supervised at Kiel University in Germany, actually, with Katja being her main supervisor. And so all the work was done by Janina. Any mistakes that I'm presenting are entirely mine. What I want to talk about is an app-based scavenger hunt that we did on coastal protection. So as in the previous talks, obviously we were very much impacted by COVID. So we wanted to create socially distant learning opportunities. And we were aiming for a target group of 16-year-old students in a school setting. So the learning outcomes that I'm listing here are ones that are part of their regular curriculum. We wanted them to know which coastal protection measures exist close to their homes. We wanted them to also recognize coastal protection measures in the wild. And then we wanted them to understand why those rules are in place, for example, to protect dunes and what those rules are. And so what we did was we used the app ActionBound, which lets us create interactive mobile adventures. And we had a really great experience with that. ActionBound is free for the participants to use to play the scavenger hunt, to participate. It does cost if you wanted to use it for educational or commercial use, but there's also the opportunity. They are very, I'm not being paid for saying this, but they are very helpful. So there's licenses for private use that you can use and that you can test with and play with. And they also are happy to negotiate the prices to make it more accessible. And yeah. The way this worked for us was that we used the participants' own smartphones to play the scavenger hunt. All the media can be downloaded in advance, and the game can be played offline if there's any restrictions in terms of network quality or media usage or those kind of things. And what ActionBound does is that it can provide media related to and released at specific locations. So we have students walking around in the area where we want them, but if their GPS comes close to one of the waypoints that we've set, then we kind of open up the possibility for them to look at certain media. It is also an interactive experience in that there's the opportunity to ask multiple choice questions or to ask for free notes from people playing those scavenger hunts. And there are statistics available for the person who created the scavenger hunt. So we have an overview over how long it took people to play and what their answers were, those kind of things. So yeah, we set out to design the scavenger hunt. And what we used to help us design this was the self-determination theory by Deci and Ryan. And this is a theory that I find very helpful when designing learning opportunities, because self-determination theory gives us 3 basic needs that need to be fulfilled for people to feel intrinsic motivation, and intrinsic motivation being the best way to learn, the most successful way to learn, the most enjoyable, the most sustainable way to learn. And so those 3 basic needs that need to be met are autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And those are the needs that are met when we engage in play usually. So what autonomy means is that we feel in control of what we are doing. So we are not forced to take certain decisions. We can do what we want in that moment. Obviously, in a school setting, autonomy is kind of limited for obvious reasons, but there are ways to increase a feeling of autonomy, or increase not just the feeling, but autonomy in fact. For example, by giving students different choices to show that they've mastered a certain concept, or to provide waypoints where we want students to be to look at certain features, but to leave it to them to choose a certain path to get there, and also to leave it up to them to decide how much time they want to spend at certain times. And we try to help a feeling of autonomy there by letting them know how far they were into the scavenger hunt. For example, letting them know when they were at the waypoint that was furthest out, that now they kind of had reached the furthest point, that they would have to make the whole way back, but that they could decide to take a break now, or that they could also just come back, take the break at the point where they started, and yeah, decide on those kind of things. So this is the setting in which we were at. So on the left, you see where we were located in Germany, close to Kiel. And on the right, you see the satellite image of the area where we were. So we started out here at point 1, and then students went along the coastline looking at different features related to coastal protection, and they came back to 12. And as you can see on the satellite picture, there are, so this is a marina, just to give you an idea of the scale. There's a dike running all the way along the coastline here. There's groins that are here where you see the 8 that are visible. There's the sandbanks. Yeah, there's all kinds of features that they can investigate on the scavenger hunt. And so one example of what we asked for was to upload a picture of the split hook. And you saw that on the previous slide here. This is the feature we were looking for, but obviously it's very different seeing those kind of things when you're standing in the location rather than when you're looking at it on a satellite picture. So yeah, you see this feature in both images, but it's in the left one, we're not quite sure whether they actually knew what we were looking at or whether they tried to take a nice picture. So next time we're going to ask a better question, yeah, and ask them to mark maybe what they are looking at or what they want to point out.
Just to say, you've got 1 minute. Sorry, just to say you've got 1 minute to go. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So relatedness is about a sense of belonging. We have small student groups working together, and we provide a sense of belonging by asking them to relate experiences with extreme weather events. And this is an example of the kind of events that we typically see in Kiel, where we have the storm flood, which comes over the streets. And so we do that in order for them to open up a little bit to each other and share experiences and bond. And then competence is the third basic need that we wanted to address, a feeling of mastery. So we asked them to do tasks that are challenging but solvable. For example, we wanted them to create a very short movie that showed what they were learning. And we were really surprised by the quality of movies that came in. So this is one example where they actually put a lot of effort in. They started out with a person walking down the dike and then straight into the dunes, and the narrator talking about the coastal protection measures you see, and then actually interacting with this person and explaining to them why they shouldn't be walking into the dunes. And what we've learned was that generally this worked really well. We would use it again. We found that self-determination theory was really helpful for us to guide us in developing this. We liked the inclusion of gamification elements. What we noticed was that we should have tested a lot more than we did, because if you have closed text field answers, for example, if dog is the correct answer of who shouldn't be running free in the dunes, and then dogs isn't accepted, that makes it very, very frustrating for everybody. And one thing that I would really like to do in the future, and I'm super excited that there's a talk coming up about this, is to do this as a co-creation thing in the future. And that is actually implemented within the app. So we could have done that. We just didn't manage to do it this time. But in total, we were very pleased. We ran this with a class of students and got their feedback. And yeah, I can totally recommend doing this to anyone who's interested. I'm happy to talk about that later as well. I've written up a blog post that has a little more information. I'm going to paste the link in the chat in a second. And I think my time is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mirjam. That was really interesting, and I can see lots of applause coming in for you. There are a couple of questions that you might like to look at and think about that we will come back to after the next talk. Thank you very much. Our last talk in this session is from Annie Ockleford. Annie Ockleford from the University of Brighton, and she's going to be talking about exploring the use of ThingLink. So I'll hand over to you, Annie, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning when your time is up. Thank you.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Julia. So I'm just going to share my screen, hopefully, and hopefully everybody should be able to see my screen. I'm also going to apologise because there is a slightly snoring dog in the background, so apologies if you hear random noises. Hopefully everybody can see that screen. Perfect. Cool. All right, so this was a project that I did at Brighton, and I developed an online virtual field trip to replace a field trip that I was taking to Sicily. I posted this on Twitter, and Zara got in contact and said, this looks great. I'm going to try and put one of these together. So this is kind of a joint presentation between Zara and I. Zara is here, so any questions can also be directed to her. And if I misrepresent anything, I'm sure Zara can jump in as well. So heard of ThingLink. I hadn't until I was desperately scrabbling around to try and find a virtual alternative. It seems to be used within schools more than kind of an academic setting, but it's essentially a free education platform, and it allows users to virtually walk through environments, and that kind of can be 360 immersive experiences as well. As I said, it's free, it's really simple to use, and I'll kind of show you some examples in a minute. And there's the thing that I really liked about it, which is why I went with ThingLink rather than kind of some of the other options there are, is there's a really great opportunity to kind of link with external resources, and you can embed audio, you can embed videos, you can embed still photographs. And again, I'll show you some examples in a minute. But it was super simple to use and to put together, and I really liked it because of this ability to kind of embed all of these different resources in there as well. So the examples that I'm going to show you in a minute, the first one is from my work, which replaced our second year fieldwork trip to Sicily. So traditionally this is for second year students. We take them for a week and they learn different skills during that week. So we have a rivers day, we have a vegetation day, we have a volcanology day, and then they develop their own project on the final day. But it is very much about developing fieldwork skills. So this is something I was struggling to think about, of how am I going to do this in kind of a virtual setting when actually I need these students to be developing skills as if they were in the field. And similarly for Zara's work at Newcastle, it was replacing a second year residential skills course. So similar problems for Zara in terms of, we have to be able to develop something where students can see these skills and develop these skills that they'll be able to then take forward going into their final year, particularly for dissertation projects. So rather than talk about it and to give you an idea of actually what it looks like, I'm going to show you 3 examples. The first is the river tour that I developed. So as I said, we traditionally would take our students to Sicily. However, we kind of made a choice as a module team to say we don't have kind of the resources we need, so we didn't have the data or the drone footage or the photographs to be able to do that justice for Sicily. So actually we swapped completely and we did a virtual field trip to somewhere just north of Brighton in the South Downs, and we were looking again at similar things to what we would be looking at in Sicily. So I ran the Rivers Day, and the first thing that I would traditionally do in the field to give students an understanding of what the field site looks like is actually just to do a walkover survey of the section of river that we're looking at and talk them through the different techniques that we'll be using or they would be using during the day. And again, I was thinking this is really difficult if these students haven't been to this field site to actually visualise what that looks like in order to then be able to begin to interpret the data that they need to do for the rest of their day with me. So I developed this virtual river tour as kind of a walkthrough for them to have a look at and to kind of really get a feeling of what that river site looked like. So you can see very small stream, so sort of 2-3 meters wide. This is kind of the landing page of the ThingLink tour. Okay, so what you can see on this screen are very different or different buttons. So we've got photographs. So again, this was just kind of looking at the banks that were either side of the river. We've got these little YouTube videos. So again, what I wanted to give the students an idea of was kind of how diverse the site was. So I actually took just recordings on my iPhone, uploaded them to YouTube, and then put them in as a video link. And you can just see, really, really just simple videos, just showing them what the site looked like, looking upstream and downstream, just to give them an idea of what it would be like if they were stood there. So you can embed all of these different options. So I'll show you some different options on Zara's in a minute. But how I used it was I had 10 cross sections. So basically I had a screen on my ThingLink for every cross section. And then what I had was both a button which was a video of me walking between cross sections and also a button which took students to the next cross section. So again, here you can see we're now at cross section 2. And you can see similar things. So here we've got pictures of kind of the site in slightly more detail. Again, we've got YouTube links. So again, this was just me talking about this kind of woody debris dam. And I went out under kind of flood conditions and under low flow conditions just to give them an idea of what that field site looked like. So I think the most important thing that I wanted to get across is actually what this river looked like kind of as you walked between sections. So again, this button which says kind of as an example of me walking between cross sections. So again, really just simple video, just walking up the river, again, just to give them an idea of what this channel looked like. So quite a lot of inbuilt diversity into these kind of ThingLink tours that you can do. So that was mine, looking at rivers. This is one of Zara's, and she puts me to shame because she actually used her 360 camera. So you can see the landing page here is looking at a woodland area in 360, so you can zoom around this. And again, similar embedded options that I showed you on my tour. So we've got photos so for example, here is the bat box that was in the tree. But Zara's also linked to data and how you would record data. So again, as I said, this was kind of very much looking at skills and developing skills. So this is kind of an idea of how you would analyse certain data, what the data would look like, and what the students would essentially be looking at. Again, kind of information screens here. So talking the students through how to set up their plot or their data with great questions in here to get the students thinking as they kind of navigate around this kind of virtual environment. So as I said, the 360 is fantastic, and I wish I had had the time or the inclination to actually go through it with mine. So that's one of the examples from Zara, and the second one, again, very similar, is just in freshwater environments, so you can see what it looks like. So it might just take a minute to load. But, you know, very similar in concept. So again, students can kind of look at this environment. There's links to papers and to information. So all three tours have got quite a similar look about them. Okay, so that just gives you an idea of what this interface looks like. But
About
if I go back to this
Annie.
talk, sorry?
About a minute to go, Annie.
Yep, perfect. So really intuitive to develop, but it took quite a long time to do it if you kind of wanted to do it properly. But the ability to kind of integrate these resources was really, really easy and really useful. But it had the potential to become complicated quite quickly. So you had to develop, for example, a YouTube channel. That was the easiest way that I found to do it. But actually in teaching and using it within the teaching, the students reported it was really easy to navigate around, and I've shown you a quick kind of spin around some of these, but it was really easy to navigate in kind of a teaching setting. Really useful as an ongoing resource for students, so they could kind of revisit this and kind of think, okay, what did that cross section look like, or what was that little bit of information, which we wouldn't necessarily be able to do in the field. And as you can see from the quotes on the right hand side, we had really, really good feedback from the students and saying that they actually could visualize everything much better. However, the final point of note here is actually it took a lot of time for students to fully engage with this, particularly with the embedded resources. So whereas it might take half an hour or an hour in the field to do this, it was taking the students a lot longer to engage with this actually in a teaching setting. So that was something I didn't take account of and would need to do that going forward. But they really liked the fact that they could go back and look at stuff. So hopefully that's given you an idea of actually what ThingLink looks like. I know there's a presentation tomorrow or a workshop tomorrow that actually is looking at developing these. So hopefully now I've given you an idea of what they look like. That workshop will be useful tomorrow. But Zara and I are around if you kind of want to ask any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And there's lots of applause appearing on the screen as well. If the speakers from that session could turn your cameras on. Alice has very helpfully collated all of the questions and emailed them to me. So I'll ask a question to each of you, and then if we have more time, I'll cycle through again. Okay, so for James, we've got a question from Debbie. She says, this was brilliant, but how long did it take you to mark in comparison to a more normal assignment?
Great question. Thanks, Debbie. I think it started out really well. So the scavenger hunt was open for 4 weeks, and submissions trickled through quite regularly for about the first 3.5 weeks. So that was easy to mark. I just set aside small times, and it was actually really fun to mark. The challenge was probably in the last 2 to 3 days, where there were a group of students who decided to do all of the activities in that last pre-deadline phase, and so the marking was pretty horrible for for that condensed time frame. Overall, probably quite similar, but more fun. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And this is for both Mirjam and James. The question is, how do you risk assess a self-directed field exercise? Mirjam, do you want to come in first there?
Yeah, I can say we actually didn't, because we created this and then the school teachers had to decide whether they would go with their classes or not, and so they had to do their own risk assessment. So sorry, I don't have any good advice here.
James, did you consider that?
Yeah, similar. It was very survival mode, just trying to pull something together. I saw another point which mentioned the risk of apps changing and things, which I think is a really important point that I hadn't thought of. So I just wanted to acknowledge that one as well.
Great. And a question for Annie: if you were going to do this again, do you think you would adjust the? Oh, hang on, no, sorry, that's I've got mucked myself up. Did you have the students do any analysis? Could they collect data and associate it with your tour?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure for Zara, but for mine, they couldn't actually physically collect data kind of using the tour. So what I did was actually I collected the data for them. So it was just, sediment size data, etc. And then that was embedded in each one of the cross sections. For each cross section, there was associated data with it. And in the afternoon, the students went away and kind of did the number crunching as they would do in the field, and then presented it back kind of in the afternoon. So they couldn't physically collect their own data kind of using what they had on the screen, but I gave it to them and it was kind of embedded within that ThingLink tool.
Right. Super. Do you think you would consider enabling students to add things, or do you think that would just become nuts?
I think it would be carnage. However, on the final day, the students actually had to do their own presentation and projects. So they kind of had to generate some of their own data, and a couple of the groups actually did develop their own ThingLink. So whilst I think on the actual kind of for a Rivers Day or whatever, I think it would be difficult for them to kind of collect their own data, they did take it kind of on board and run with it.
Right, thank you. Returning to James, there's two questions about how students responded to the gamification of fieldwork. So was it a constant decision, a conscious decision for you to include gamification, and how do you think it affected student motivation?
Yeah, I think it was a conscious attempt to try and make it fun, I suppose. That was our first lockdown, and it was very new and different and challenging. It was my first semester teaching. I'd only just met the students before we all went online, and so it was a definite priority to try and incorporate some element of fun in through the gamification of it. I think the student motivation was mixed. There were probably 2/3 of the class that were on board quite early on in the process, and they were motivated relatively immediately and started taking part. But there were others who took a little bit longer to get motivated. Yeah.
Thank you. Mirjam, coming back to you, with an activity based on phones, I think you said people could do it offline, so they could download things when they had a Wi-Fi connection and then do it offline. But did you have any issues with data storage and sort of access and ability to use phones?
No, we didn't, and we knew that in that target group, people would have access to phones. I didn't actually think about data storage. Now that you mentioned that, that's very clear that teenagers' phones would probably be full with all kinds of things and not have space for school stuff. But we didn't run into that problem, but it's very good to keep in mind for future activities. And yeah, with Action Bound, you can actually pre-download things and then play things offline. I think it's a very helpful option. Obviously, then you can't have the interactive part of uploading things, or they can only upload them after they get back to Wi-Fi or whatever. So that is something that we considered when planning our activity. But we knew that we would have a good network coverage throughout the region we were working in. Yeah.
Thank you. I can see that a few people have asked Annie about how to embed this in a VLE, and I think Zara's already answered the questions in the chat, which is super.
She's doing a great job, because I actually can't see the chat, so Zara's on the answering.
Excellent. So that I think you sort of answered this towards the end of your talk. The question came in early, but what the student feedback on using ThingLink, did they enjoy it?
Yeah, they really liked it. So I actually had them on day 4. So we ran a week long kind of online field course. So I had them on day 4. So they were a bit screened out and a bit kind of like, oh God, really? Do we have to do another day? But actually, this kind of gave them something to really get to grips with, and it was kind of the only virtual tool that we had during that week. So they really did seem to engage with it, and they said it was really easy to navigate, and they liked the fact that you could kind of go back and look at it So, you know, when they were doing their coursework, for example, they could actually go back and kind of remind themselves of it. So generally really, really good feedback from the students.
Brilliant. I've also seen people use it to allow students to become familiar with a field course before visiting. So knowing that they're going to go there,
Yeah, absolutely.
They can sort of just feel a bit more comfortable about where they're going. I think that's most of the questions covered. My apologies if I've missed anybody. Please feel free to contact the speakers or to follow things up in the chat. In the interest of keeping time, we'll close this session now, and there is a 10-minute biology break. So a cup of tea or whatever it is that you need to recharge.